In the beginning, there was nothing. It was black, pitch black. And then came the light, and with the light, we saw colors, and we loved what we saw. We loved it so much that we began using color every day in our lives to make our lives more beautiful, to create well-being, to make functions, to make meaning of our lives. Today, I will talk to you about color in our lives and how we work with color in our design. And I will talk a lot about both the aesthetics of color. I will talk about the very important function of color. And I will talk about the meaning of color. Because all three dimensions we have to consider, right? A very brief introduction of myself. My name is Karl Johan Bertilsson. Most people know me as Karl. I have had the honor and the privilege to work with color for more than 26 years, basically or literally all over this planet, together with architects, with designers, with industries and universities. One of the most fascinating jobs that you can have, because everybody loves color. I have the beautiful title of Creative Director of NCS Color, which is a global standard of color. I have my own design studio, MRKRL, usually involved in bigger, larger design projects, not only color, but design from the beginning to the end. That's me. And today, I will try to give you a crash introduction to my world of color. And not necessarily my world is your world, but with my experience, my knowledge, based on the science of color, I hope I can give you some insights what it's all about when we need to take color seriously. Because color is pure psychology. There is a French scientist, Eugène Chevreul, who said, color only exists if there is an observer. If there is no observer, color does not exist. From the very moment we are born, or even before we are born, we begin to create relation to color. And as I said in the beginning, our relation to color is so important that today, most of you here today, need to make sure that you choose the right color for your product, for your design, for your space, to make people feel comfortable or like the things. So we use color, we choose colors on our products. And if you listen to Judith van Vliet the last time she was here, she mentioned probably that a huge part of the decision to buy something depends only on the color that you see. If you don't like what you see, you don't buy it, thanks to the color, right? I usually say that to be able to make a correct color decision, we need to work with color intuitively. We have to have the feeling. It's, somebody tells me, feel it in the belly, then it's okay. But the balance or the story of this, to make it easy to work with color, is the balance of the intuitive work with color with the rational work of color. And the rational work is based on knowledge. But you cannot make color decision based on rational decisions only. You need your intuitive presence to make the things correctly, right? Because color is well-being, and that is scientifically proven. We talked about urban architecture before, and an urban architecture is a social responsibility. All science shows that if you live in an area with the right color scheme, hopefully with different colors, with contrasting colors, harmonizing colors, you cause well-being. We like to be there, the prices of property increases, etc. This is the same for everything in every product, whether it's fashion, architecture, design. Color is so important. Scientifically, we know today that the human being, we can perceive around 10 million different color perceptions. That's a lot of colors. And when I ask the question to everybody, do you like color? Do you think color is important? And everybody says, yes. And then what happens? When we make the color decision, we go for one color most of the time. Which color is that? White, right? And my question is always, if color is so important and we love color, why do we at the end make color decisions of white? I have talked to architects around the world that say that default in our design is always white because it takes too long time to make color decisions. My response to that person who says that is that then you have not understood your mission. An architect or a designer, it's not only creating function and form and everything else, you have to create also the feeling of well-being. In a space, color will assist. And if you don't work with color, you will not cause this. Right? In our research, we know that most of the time, or many times when people make this non-decision of white, is because of fear. Fear of making a mistake. If I paint the wall red, everybody will have an opinion. And I will need to explain why I chose red. If I choose white, nobody will even ask the question. So many times it's a fear, and that's why I say the more knowledge, and I have so many stories about this, that just give the little knowledge about color. We have architects from all over the world, designers, that from not using color suddenly, the only thing they work with color when they understand, or when we understand color, which is a very big thing. Now, white is not necessarily a bad color. It's one of these millions of colors, or one color area, I would say. This is the third largest kitchen producer in the world, Hecker. I was there some weeks ago. We have a collaboration with Hecker Kitchen, and of course they have white kitchens because many people want to have white kitchens. It's conservative. The kitchen will last for many, many years. You don't want to get tired of it and everything. And they showed me the showroom. White kitchen with gray surroundings. This is one of the biggest mistakes that humans are making today. Using only neutral colors. Because we don't give the emotions that we want. And I told them what happens if you look at this kitchen now, but if you change the surroundings of this, doesn't matter, but use something to frame the color. If you look at this and you go back to the gray, the colors is what will give you some emotion. Commercially, IKEA is one of these companies we have worked with for many years. We are responsible for the brand identity. IKEA has a very, very strict rule. There has to be chromatic colors always in the collection. They know that probably they will not sell a lot. But when people see that orange sofa, they say, oh, that's a beautiful sofa, let's buy the gray one. It's commercial. Color wakes us up, gives us feelings, makes us pay attention. I met this guy, a quick anecdote, I have to tell this story. Can I say this? At the Stockholm Furniture Fair last year, he had a chair. And I work a lot with color trends, so we'll talk a little about that. And had the perfect trend color, this green trend color I've been talking about, on this chair. And I asked him, wow, what a beautiful chair. And he looked at me, you know, it's so strange. I have never worked with color. I worked with chairs all my life. It's the first time I work with color, and now everybody wants to talk to me. I said, yeah, you see? You had the most beautiful design of your chair. the most fantastic seating, nobody paid attention to you. Suddenly you decided to work with color, and now everybody wants to talk to you. This is the power of color. White is sometimes absolutely necessary in our design. I will just give you a curious example very quickly. This guy, Antoine, is today the hottest artist in Sweden. Swedish Lebanese, very hot guy. We did some jobs. We designed his studio at home, very black, very dark colors. He had a concert 3 weeks ago at this auditorium in Sweden. He sold the tickets in one day, 20,000 tickets in one day. Never happened in Sweden so fast. He wanted this to be bombastic. And the center of the show should be a statue, a big, big, big statue. Here, white is perfect. But here comes the little thing to think about. White can be many things, right? Because the question is always, what kind of white should I use to get the best possible effect? So in this case, it was more simple. It is more complicated when you work with colors where you have to put many colors together in your interior, in fashion or something. What is the perfect white color that goes together with the other colors? Because our eyes are so sensitive in the white area, we have to be very careful. When it comes to this, the perfect white is the whitest of the white that we call 0300. That's the whitest color we can produce. So we 3D printed this huge statue for Antoine's show because it has to be white, because it's a show, right? Where you have a lot of color light. Sorry about this. You woke up, huh? Yeah, I know. I saw you were falling asleep. I just want to show you a little bit. This is no rocket science. But it was quite bombastic, this fantastic white statue that we designed for his show to give you some feeling of this. And a lot of this is also because Sweden, snow, his songs are a lot about the social problems, but also about the cold weather. So there was a lot of white in this. And white is a color that makes things bigger, more bombastic, when it has the right kind of surrounding. And obviously now, with this bombastic stage and all of the light effects, then white is perfect. We will not talk more about white. We will leave this area. Let's talk about our design a little bit more. When we design, we want to use color as an integral part of our design. This is a line of bathrooms that we designed. If you remember Antoine standing on a stage with a white statue, all of the attention was on him and the light and the white statue. The idea here is exactly the same. We have a bathroom and the centerpiece is you. You're standing in front of the mirror and all the attention should be in this place. And we use color to draw all the attention to the most important part. We even made a mirror bathtub here. But how important is color then? Because I always ask the question, is color important? Yeah, color is important. Let me give you a number. You know this company called Google? It's a joke, I'm sorry. I ask this because I give a lot of lectures in China. In China, they don't use Google, right? Anyway, you know that Google makes money when you click on these blue links, right? That's when they make the money. About 10, 15 years ago, this blue links was slightly greenish blue. Nobody knows this. It's official, but nobody knows about this. In secret, they began manipulating the blue color of the links, trying to see if it had an effect or not. So from changing the links from a greenish blue to make it as it is today, slightly reddish blue, they have now documented that they increased their revenues by $200 million a year just by changing the the blue color to another blue color. Because it triggers us more to click on a reddish blue color than on a greenish blue color. This is how important the right color is. And we're not talking about going from red to blue. We're just talking about tweaking a blue color. To be able to do this, we have to understand how to do things. We have to understand color, right? Let me give you a story about color communication. In 2006, I was in Buenos Aires, Argentina for my first color trend workshop. We were supposed to develop the trends for Latin America for 2008. Okay? So here's this room with 20 color experts from all over the world discussing color for the future. I came from a company that was called then the Scandinavian Color Institute, square-minded scientific people that could not permit anything if it was not scientifically proven. I flew down to this trend shop, very skeptical, and said, come on, fluff, just a guessing game. So I was sitting there talking, and suddenly one of these perfect, the trend experts rose up, he stood up, and he said, you know what? I think romantic colors will be trendy for 2008. And everybody in the room, this comes from one of the most experts of color trends. And everybody in the room said, yes, we agree, romantic colors, we want romantic colors. And I was just sitting there from my square-minded scientific brain and said, I'm sorry, can you explain more? I don't understand. What is a romantic color? And he began explaining, it's, these colors on this area. And suddenly about 2 or 3 other people raising that, no. These are not romantic colors. These are, and suddenly all of the room were discussing about romantic colors. And nobody understood each other. At the end, what everybody applauded as a romantic color was not even on the final palette, because nobody understood each other. This is the everyday work in the design community in the world, because the first challenge we have is when we have a color that we need to discuss, we need to understand what we're looking at. I need to understand this color, and to be able to discuss variations, directions, combinations, I need to understand what I'm looking at, right? So this is why it is so important to understand how to describe and communicate color. Werner Pantone, who designed the Pantone lamp, the Pantone chair, very famous, he even wrote a book about this. On the front page of his book, it's a big color circle, because he always says, color always has a meaning and function. Make sure to make the right color decision based on knowledge, right? This is why this color language developed that I work with, which is NCS Color System, that GLC works with in Egypt, and many companies, one of the standards. This is the only color language that exists that describes color exactly the way we see color. That makes it possible for us to describe color and talk about the directions, okay? I will not teach you this language. You can learn this from Mohammed. He's an expert if you don't know, but you should know. I will make a test with you a little bit later, okay? Let's continue to the next step. Let's talk about the color design process. My world. Number one, understand who are we designing for. We had a question, what is my favorite color? One of the biggest mistakes we see in the color design community is that designers many times avoid colors that we have problems with. Either we have problems in perceiving or colors that we don't like. Now I always tell, no, you're not designing for yourself. You're designing for someone else, right? So make sure to leave this. Step number 2, the material. What kind of material will you use? This color, will it produced on many different kind of materials? We have to understand the limitations. So we have to make sure, because this is a very big mistake many times for product design, that we choose a color that can be produced on metal or on plastic, but impossible on leather. So from the very beginning, we have to understand the process of what colors we can, or in the color space, what areas can we actually work with. Step number 3, existing color. Now, this is now one of the most important things in the color design process. A color almost never lives alone. A color almost always lives in a context together with other colors. When we make color decisions, many times there are colors we cannot change. They're already there. And the color we choose has to live together with those colors. So we have to make this analysis. We have to understand what colors already exist in the floor, the door frame, the window frame, the big sofa, or whatever, to be able to make the right color decisions, right? Which gives us the next area, the aesthetics of color. And then the meaning and the function, right? We want things to be beautiful. How can we then put things together to make it beautiful? How can we combine colors to make them feel harmonious or in the way we want to feel them? And once again, many of the times I tell everybody, you have to work intuitively. You have to work with your eyes, your heart, your stomach, your brain. But there are certain things to think about that can help you make things a little bit easier, okay? The research has quite extensive when it comes to how to make color combinations. This is from Lars Sivik, one of the scientists behind the NCS system, trying to explain how do we perceive certain color combinations, right? When we analyze, this is Josef Frank, one of the most famous designers in Sweden. He lived 100 years ago, but still his patterns and his designs are super popular. And he used quite dramatic colors together, colors that people usually are afraid to work with. When we analyze these colors, like we usually see in most of the masterpieces, when people like patterns or color combinations, we see that usually, not always, but usually, colors have something in common. The description of the colors. Like in this case, for example, they have the same nuance of the color. They have the same whiteness of the color, right? This is one of the sciences that is being used a lot in making color combinations today. It's a very safe way of combining colors. Same nuance, same hue, the same blackness, the same chromaticness, and the same whiteness. The last three, blackness, chromaticness, and whiteness, are scientific, what they have proven are the ones that the people appreciate most because they are more dynamic, these combinations. But they have this something in common, all of these colors. When, for example, this project we had in China, when we developed standard apartments for people, it's not for one family. It's for thousands or maybe hundreds or millions of families. To use color similarities is the safest way. Because if you design for a private family or company, you can adopt specifically for them. But if you want to design for a big community, for many, many people, one of the safest ways is to work color similarities. Right? So in this case, just to show an example, the similarities are in hue. The colors are YATR, most of the colors here. Right? The other thing that I usually tell everybody, that also, and I repeat this because I'm square-minded and scientific many times, the research shows that what we appreciate the most is when there is contrast of color. Monochromatic spaces or monochromatic products, we don't appreciate that much. We appreciate when things happen. Research even show that in rooms like this, or if they're white or blue only, it actually makes us feel bad. Physically, we feel ill when we are in monochromatic spaces. We need to be able to rest our eyes, right? And this is the fantastic thing about nature. I was not supposed to about religion right now, but I said I almost get religious when I see these things because nature is so clever of combining or making contrast and complementary colors to make things both functional and beautiful, right? We know when you're a surgeon and you see all this blood, you have to rest our eyes on green because they're complementary, right? For us to be able to work easier. This we have to introduce to design. This simple exercise, you look at the dot in the middle, right? And you see what happens with the colors. The pink becomes green, right? Because our eyes and brain compensates. Okay? Complementary colors is when we want to use pop-up effects. We want to have contrast. Things should happen. And when it comes to complementary, it is good to work with complementary that are opponent to each other in the color space because they belong to each other, because our brain wants them to be together, right? We did this for a restaurant, one of the most famous Indian restaurants in Stockholm. They wanted to highlight the food. So we analyzed all of the colors of the food, very chromatic, Indian flavored, colored, red, oranges, very nice colors. So we said, if you want to highlight the colors of the food, the restaurant should not be these colors. The restaurant should be designed in a different way, with neutral, more dull colors, darker shades that can highlight the color to contrast the color of the food, right? There's 3 Indians in Stockholm. Lightness contrast, when we talk about public spaces, is one of the most important things. Because when we talk about hospitals, educational institutions, we have to understand that not all people have a perfect sight. They have to use color as a navigation. So there has to be a contrast between the floor, the wall, the door should be framed, and there should be a lightness contrast. The recommendation is 0.4 as a contrast, always, because if we understand the contrast of 0.4, then we understand where the door is, where the floor is, etc., right? I usually say that the best way of understanding lightness contrast is to work with legibility. Translating this into how easy it is to read a text on a background, right? Like for black on yellow, white on blue, yellow on blue. Coming back to the famous IKEA, that we are responsible for the branding, we also developed the Swedish flag. So this flag of Sweden is also something that we standardized that are very, very specific. But from a commercial perspective, IKEA cannot use the Swedish colors because they are national standards. But they want to appear Swedish, number one. So they tweak a little bit, so the colors are slightly more reddish on both sides, both the blue and the yellow one, and a little bit different in whiteness, blackness, and chromaticness. Enough for us to understand that they're yellow and blue, they look Swedish. Perfect contrast. Yellow on blue is a perfect contrast, which means if you look in an IKEA department store, you can see it kilometers away. 3, very intelligent. Super difficult color to produce for exterior material. So you can basically guarantee that no one else will make these colors. Fantastic branding exercise. This is Shanghai, right? So using legibility is a very good guidance of what contrast you should use also in design. Let's talk a little bit about the function of color, a little bit. Because function, especially now in public spaces, but in every design we do, color will always have a function. There will always be a consequence of the color that we use. In private homes, we can use it, to make the contrast between the floor, where the floor ends, how to frame the doors, etc., right? One of my favorite things is to use color in hidden spaces. So when you open up a wardrobe or a drawer or something, you suddenly get this color shock because it's so easy. Once again, you get this fantastic hallelujah feeling when you see it. It's like, wow. But it's also, the shoes are in the red closet. But I don't want it to be red outside, but inside then it's red. That's the function, right? And the wow feeling. Let me tell you now about the Letovo project. Letovo school, this is before the war, is a Russian school, is today considered as the #1 IB school in the world, top notch. Most of the students that graduate go directly to Harvard in the United States in this school. We entered a project in designing the future schools for Letovo to make the complete architecture. Okay, we will not talk about the architecture of these schools. We will talk about the colors. I came back from Russia 1 week before the invasion, and everything was stopped. They are actually building these schools right now, but it's in this Russian architectural firm. What we managed to do is to implement the color scheme in the schools. Let me talk to you a little bit about this. Public space, kids, rational thinking. Number 1, kids love color. Number 2, colors make kids super active if you're not careful. Do we want kids to be super active in a classroom? No. But we want to use color to make them feel that color is good in their school, to be proud, and we want to use it as guidance. So we developed the color scheme where the main color is very low chromatic. It doesn't stir up too many feelings, but it's harmonizing because it's a very similar nuance. And we add each room should have their own color identity. So if I stand in the reception or somewhere, I know I'm going to the yellow school, the yellow room, right? Or the blue room. Very simple for kids to understand. So we implemented this philosophy also by adding symbols and names, making it more dramatic. The ocean room, for example, not too many colors. A nice carpet, the entrance, right? This is the functional color. I know with the ocean room, I don't have to read ocean. I know that blue is the ocean room, right? I know that the purple one is a space room. I know the green is the mountain room. Very simple. So coloring guidance, we talked about the parking lots. Where's my car? What is in the green area, right? Very popular to use today in architecture. The future schools that they're building now, and they're building many, they are implementing this color program in all these schools. So they kept actually the color scheme, which is quite interesting. The meaning of color, let's talk about this. Think about this. When you choose colors, which is the right question to ask? Do you want a happy color, or do you want a color that makes you happy? Think about this. Why? Because we usually learn things. People tell us. I had a meeting last week with some guys who wanted to make this anti-violence campaign and said, we chose yellow because we learned that yellow makes people feel happy. And I said, where did you get that from? From Hong Kong, you know, when the protest with the umbrellas in Hong Kong, it was yellow. So, yeah, but in China, yellow has a very, very, very important meaning. Does yellow make you happy? No. Okay. So what do we need to do? We need to choose colors that make us happy. If we want something that is happy, connected to happiness, then we need to make sure that the colors make us happy. And forget about the things that we learn. And really do the job in choosing the colors that gives us this feeling we want. We talk about the inherent traits, environmental traits, social cultural traits, right? The inherent trait, very simple, basically the same for everybody. Fire is orange. Per definition, orange colors are considered as warm colors, right? Blue, or especially greenish blue colors, are considered as cold colors. And I will challenge you. This is a blue cold color. This is also a blue color that for many people is definitely not cold because it's, you know, we think about the tropical, we think about the Red Sea, right? Not considered to be cold. So there are things we have to think about. This is also why it's so important to make the analysis. When I say I want a cold color, we have to make sure that this color, this specific blue, actually makes people feel this. This is research they did from universities, and 9 different universities. And it's curious. if you look at these 9 countries with warm colors, I mean, I thought that orange, everybody thought was a warm color. There's one country who doesn't even mention orange as a warm color, that's Russia. Think about this. This means that we have to do the job. We have to make the analysis. Right? One thing that is quite inherent is the generic feeling we get from color areas. If you look at this, then we divide the color areas in different regions, right? For example, colors that are darker and more chromatic darker colors, we usually perceive as more elegant colors, luxurious, expensive. If they become strong, chromatic, but a little bit too whitish, it's the opposite. We usually consider them as cheap. Okay, this is general knowledge. I will challenge you now, because I brought a gift. And I want the first guy who answers this question, I will give this box of Swedish candy, the most popular candy, Ahlgrens bilar, the cars. The only way to stop them is in your mouth, right? Beautiful candy. We were involved in a legal case years ago in defending another company who used the same colors on their car candy, trying to explain who is right and wrong. Can you copy the color on other car candy? But I do this not because I will take this to this case. I want this. I want you to raise your hand. I will show you an NCS description of a color. It's one of the most famous colors in the world. I don't want you to say anything. Just think about this. If you think you know what color this is, raise your hand. And the first one who raises your hand and answers correctly, I will give this beautiful box of candy. Are you ready? Yeah?
Okay. And I cannot participate.
And you cannot participate.
So sorry. I hope that my students will make me proud and know the color.
1977 Y95R describes one of the most famous colors in the world. Everybody knows this color.
Everybody knows this
100% sure. And I do this exercise because going back to the importance of communicate colors, you cannot Google. The importance of communicate, discuss colors, this is why the NCS color language exists. To be able to look at the color and say, wow, this is this color, let's talk about it. Or I call you in Cairo and said, you know, I like this color. 1977 Y95R is perfect for our project. What do you think? And you should be able to visualize it immediately. And we have a suggestion. Yes? Pepsi. Yes? Coca-Cola. You have Pepsi and Coca-Cola. More. You are very close. The reason I do this, remember what I said before? That darker chromatic colors are considered more luxurious. Yes?
That's one of my students, Wiz Bahia.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you. Bassiani, this was your second attempt.
The meaning of color, ladies and gentlemen. I knew you would say Coca-Cola. That's why I brought Coca-Cola also. Because there is a small difference between Coca-Cola red and Ferrari red. Ferrari is slightly darker. Coca-Cola is a lighter red. Coca-Cola is slightly more yellowish and Ferrari more reddish. Okay? But the difference is large enough for us to perceive that Ferrari red is an elegant color and Coca-Cola feels much cheaper. And this is one of the biggest mistakes that we do in our design when we don't do the analysis correctly. It can be grass green. It can be, and suddenly, let's choose anything. No, subconsciously, we human beings are much smarter than that. If it's not the correct color, grass green is very good because usually it's a lot of sunlight on grass green. So we see a color, but the real color is actually quite dark. we need to make sure to do it correctly, right? So besides this traits, we have obviously the social cultural traits. And I usually give the example of the big mistake that we do, that the red numbers in the West world is catastrophic. In China, red numbers is fantastic. So when I called someone at the bank in China and said, oh gosh, we have red numbers, sell everything. And said, what's the matter? Red numbers are perfect. That's wonderful. It's lucky. So we are coached with certain things that we have to understand from a social cultural perspective. I just want to show you another way how to work with product design when it comes to color that is called semantic color studies. Okay? Researchers show that it is a very good way of defining color schemes in making semantic color studies, using opposite colors. For example, sustainable, wasteful, male, female, energetic, lazy, etc. And do the analysis. So we develop color schemes randomly from our intuition, and then we test them on our target groups. Like this Renault study, the Twizy car, that they wanted to develop this for the precarious group, a very low socioeconomic group, making a mood board, what you want them to feel, or what kind of people should be appealing, right? So develop three different suggestions. Suggestion number 1, suggestion number 2, suggestion number 3. Doing the semantic study, trying to analyze which gives the perfect match of what we believe the precarious group would like to have. And the winner of this is this. These are the 6 different target groups that they developed this for, right? Social, ecological, adventurous, middle class, performer, traditional, and precarious. Semantic color studies is one of the safest ways of making color design specific for product design, but also for architecture. But it takes time. So now we have talked about aesthetics, the meaning and the function of color. And I want to mention something briefly, because this is a complete different lecture, but something that we need to understand. We have to make a difference always between what we call the inherent color and the perceived color. The color inherently that we see on a piece of paper or in a material, and the color that we actually perceive in the space or in the product that we design. And there are many things that will change this. And the biggest is obviously light, that you know. Different light sources have different temperatures, right, Kelvin, and will change the perception sometimes dramatically. There are phenomena that are quite much more dramatic than this. One of the most difficult things, and I tell you this, is if you want to do a design or an architecture, for example, where you have different materials. You have textile, you have leather, you have paint, you have wood, and you want to use the same color. My recommendation is don't do it. Because when they're produced so differently, they can change so dramatically in different light sources. One can be green and one can be red suddenly once they look the same in one light source. So careful with this. The other thing is what we call the simultaneous contrast. Remember that we seldom use only one color. We put color in a context. If you look at that square over there, it is perceived as quite more dark than the square on the right-hand side. So the way we describe it is that that's a dark gray, that's a light gray, while they are exactly the same color. So colors that surround the colors that we choose will push our perception of colors in one or other direction. We have to be conscious about this, and we have to work with this, right? And the last thing I want to touch today before we finalize is the trends. Remember I gave you the story that 2006 I was in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I kind of said color trends, that's fluffy guessing game. Today, this is one of the areas I work most with in my life, and I love color trends because there is science behind color trends. This is psychology. This is market psychology. This is understanding how the world works, and how we human beings actually work. It is a fantastic thing to work with. We need always to understand time. When in time is this for? We need to understand the geography. Where is it, right? We need the kind of industry. Who is the group? Of course, right? The other thing that when people say, you know, oh, what will be trend? Which color will be trendy in 2025 or 24? Is it blue, green, red, yellow, purple? I said, moment. When you talk about color and trends, you cannot go to narrow it down only to the hue of a color. Most of the time, actually, the nuance of the color, whether it's getting darker, lighter, more chromatic, less chromatic, is much more important than the actual hue of the color. We have to work with both dimensions, both the hue and the nuance. Scientifically, there is research that shows that we have a cyclic way of color preference. If we are bombarded with a certain color area today, our brain gets tired. When our brain gets tired of this color area, we want to go to the other extreme. And it becomes a cycle, right? So if you are in a neutral, white, grays, blacks, we get tired of this, then we need to go to the other extreme, the colorful phase. To be able to go through the colorful phase, we have to go a purification. We have to adopt first red and blue. Then it becomes purple and blue colors. It's like a cleansing of our brain before we can accept the chromatic colors. This is proven to work, but they overlap. And depending on who you are, where you are, etc., they can overlap in different phases, right? From a general perspective, in a long-term trend talk, we can say that most of the world, we are leaving a very long time. We're talking about decades of preferences for neutral colors. We have been so scared of colors now for decades, and we're moving in this direction. But this cycle can also be for the short-term trends, because we see this happens all the time. And we are adopting, we are going more and more towards the chromatic colors, accepting the chromatic colors. And in many geographies or industries, we're actually on the other side. They have been chromatic now. So we're going that they become a little bit darker, a little bit browner. So we follow this. And I'll show you this when it comes to the sort. This is the hue of the colors. So we make the analysis to see how do they change in hue over the years, if the hue is important. Like, for example, for 2024, we saw for the first time in many years that pure red colors were becoming super important. Usually they're yellowish red or bluish red, but suddenly the red pure colors became very, very important, right? But like I said, the nuance is sometimes even more important. So if you see the big difference from 2022, you can see that we didn't like chromatic colors so much. 23, we began accepting more and more chromatic colors. 2024, you can see they're quite chromatic and quite whitish colors. So this is understanding the movements, the direction of colors, right? But it's not the complete truth. When it talks about the cyclic preference, we have to understand the drivers. We have to understand if something is happening in Gaza and Israel, how does that affect our psychology? Does it make us more depressed? In depressions, we make very careful color decisions. We're a little bit afraid to make these decisions. The opposite happens when the depression finishes. Then we become... So there's certain things we have to understand what happens, right? The 2024 color trends that we have presented in 4 groups, I just want to finalize to show you this. 2024, we see a lot of chromatic, pure colors, or the whitish colors, green, pink, yellow, super important. And we see them take a lot of big areas. I was in Stockholm yesterday and suddenly I see a lot of cars driving around in this green color, right? This is a kitchen that we designed in our design studio that represent this. And this is quite interesting. We will talk more about this in the future because we see a lot of influence of AI design coming up, but it's getting mixed with vintage design. So if you look at a kitchen from the 1950s and a kitchen that is being developed by AI, they kind of merge, both in colors and in forms. which is quite interesting. Trend number 2, basics, you know, going back to the nature, biophilia, but more than biophilia is the animism, that you want to become part of the nature, one of the nature. We will not talk too much about this. This is a kitchen that we developed to see how we want to immerse ourselves into the nature, to be one of the nature, not look at the nature, but by in the nature, right? Heart stop with the red and blue. Remember the cycle, the circle. When we leave the neutrals, the first step is the neutral colors with red and blue. And we see an enormous use of red and blue together today. Right? And this is some examples of some kitchens that we developed that belong to this trend. And finally, one of my favorites, Stargazer. This is the escapism. This is in times where we need to escape from our reality. When purple, gold becomes almost like a psychedelic experience that we want to dive into, right? And this is one of my favorite objects for this. So this is the design process we work with to make sure at the end that the colors that we choose, independent of what kind of product it is, becomes the right color and becomes perceived, helping the product, the design become super successful. With this, messieurs, dames, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much, shukran, for listening. And Mr. Mohammed,
yes,
I brought you a box of candies for you too.
Thank you. Because I was going to take that from my student. Shukran. We call it shoes in Lebanon.
Huh?
Shoes.
Shoes. Okay.
I'm going to ask you to.
Oh, yeah,
thank you very much. مساء الخير. I'm going to switch to Arabic for a minute and then I'm going to go back to English. شكرا جزيلا لأنكم جيتوا. آسفين جدا وتأخرنا عليكم. I understand we are in the middle of the week, so I would like you to. I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I did, and it was beneficial. I'm going to ask Karl a few questions, and then I'm going to leave it up to you if you have any questions up there. Because you finished with color trends, and I know that we had this discussion, but it's important for me that we discuss it in front of people. The world goes berserk every September, October, November, where lots of companies around the world launch their color of the year. I know what you think about it. I know what I think about it, but I want you to share with the people if you, as a color professional, believe that color of the year is important for their work. It's important to be used if it's based on scientific research or not.
How should I answer this
Sorry
diplomatically?
for...
I think in these times it's good to be diplomatic. Color of the year is a very clever commercial solution to simplify things very much. Look, the only good thing about the color of the year is if you understand the direction, the color area, whether it's a dark direction, a light direction, a chromatic direction, or if it's a hue direction, which is more important. Color of the year has to be understood in its context. As it is presented today, color of the year is completely irrelevant to me because it doesn't mean anything. Because it doesn't come from anything. It comes from an observation for all the job that we do when we try to identify color trends. Some people sit down, they look at all of the things that we do, what we have talked about, and look at what the market is launching. And they pick kind of a generic average color that they believe that everybody can identify themselves with and call a color of the year. It's a very clever thing to do. It wakes a lot of attention, very clever. And I think many times, like I said, if you understand color trends, the directional color trends, it can give you direction, but that you have to split it down to, is it a nuance direction or is it a hue direction? Then it makes sense. If not, no.
It's a beautiful marketing tool.
It's a beautiful marketing tool, and people love it.
And the good story.
And I'm boring. I'm terribly boring.
No, you're not terribly boring. I absolutely believe so. I mean, Pantone has an authority because they sell colorants, they sell color cards. So I believe Pantone is the most uh, 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 equipped. It's the most followed color of the year that everyone talks about.
Sure.
So they've done a
No,
fantastic.
but I mean, from a commercial perspective at NCS that I work with the color trends, we also discuss if we should have a color of the year or not because it's commercially successful.
Yeah.
People love to hear it. But I cannot tell it. Someone else has to tell the story because I'm not the one. Because it's not, I don't believe in it.
And because NCS is based on data and science and not just on poetic stuff. Still on the subject of color trends, there are drivers. Political, geographical, environmental. I know that last month you've done and finished 2025 plus. But that was before what's happening in our region. That's before what we know is going to happen in the United States next year with the elections. That's before we know if everyone in the world will be able to keep our temperature below 1.5. How will whatever happens, whatever the outcome of what's happening currently, affect what you're going to publish for 2025?
Very good question. That's a very good question. And to be honest, we haven't concluded all the way. One of the theories that we have is maybe we have to have two scenarios because it can be quite extreme. Politically, economically, climate-wise, it depends on what happens in 2024 to see what kind of mood we will be in 2025. So in that sense, it's very early to say, you know, to be very, very short what will happen. So maybe we need to have two directions. If it happens in this way, we probably go in this way. There is a generic direction that is very clear in what direction we're going. But that direction can be emphasized more or less, depending on what happens in the world. So we have to be very conscious about these observations.
I mean, you're going to publish it in March or Feb 2024.
We'll probably launch it. We're discussing still whether we launch it in February or January.
That's because I always explain to my students, when I give talks, I always say that color trends are not based on what I like or you like. They are actually based on scientific data of what's happening
it's a huge
around
job.
us.
I mean, we gather a big group of color experts from all regions in the world, from all kind of industries, to share their observations. These are people that work with color trends only, basically. And we share the experience for all kind of industries and all kind of regions and find synergies to see where do they overlap, where do they, you know, what do we have in common and how do they differ a lot. And we try to, you know, to conclude based on that.
Does color trends affect businesses, how much they sell?
Yes. To answer your question, absolutely. Color trends is essential. I mean, it's because if you do color trend observations correctly, accurately, and you actually pinpoint the colors that the market wants to see, because all of us are affected by color. Even independent if we want it or not, we will be affected by colors. And if we achieve to identify the correct color drivers, it will increase sales. That's a huge yes. And it's one of the biggest things that affect sales when it comes to products.
Color marketing group hashtag is color sells.
There you go. Color sells,
I mean,
but the right color sells even more.
You're preaching the converted. One last one for me is I lecture color, work with color, teach color, but I always tell people that, and you said it, color is contextual. If color is contextual, how accurate color psychology is? I'm asking you.
Can you repeat the question, please?
If color is contextual, and if color is based on culture and perception, how accurate is color psychology?
Well, colors, a lot of researchers would say that color is psychology, pure psychology. But it can be personal, it can be group psychology, it can be regional psychology. And this is what, you know, we have to take into consideration. When we design things for global products, we have to understand how accepted are these colors from a global perspective. But if you live in Lebanon, or you live in Egypt, in Cairo, and, you know, we have to understand maybe local preferences. But color is psychology.
But does it affect us? I mean, neuroaesthetic is something super big now, and it's like the trend everywhere. Everyone's seeing if we can heal with color, if color affects us. Kandinsky started all the way saying that he hears color. And then we don't have enough data, enough research in this context. But can we say that scientifically staying in a pink room heals us? Staying in a blue room helps us better concentrate. Staying in
absolutely. But look, there's a lot of research. There's a lot of research when it comes to color and how it affects us. There is very few things that are scientifically proven. We know that blue-green colors affect our central nervous system and calms us down. And we know that high chromatic reddish oranges colors makes us more active. Okay? These are basically the only two truths that we can say is the same for everybody. But we can also say that high chromatic colors makes us more active, even if it's a blue-green color, but it's super chromatic, it will affect our active. And this can be then translated into different things. When things make you more active, it makes you more nervous. It makes you, for example, if you design a shop, and you want to have a very high chromatic color at the cashier, not a good idea. Because people will not make purchase decisions. They get too nervous, right? So it's better to have a color scheme that is soothing so people can calm down and make a purchase decision. So yes, colors affect us, but it can be very personal, it can be generic depending on the color area.
I mean, you gave the example of Google, and I mean, for me, I was fascinated when you showed me this at the beginning because it was just a nuance of a blue shade, and then
sure. And we know, but this is, I mean, we know that if you look at the hue R80B, R70B, R80B, is that we also know scientifically that most people like.
Exactly.
In general. If you have heard about the Yves Klein blue, which is one of the only very, very, very famous colors, it becomes so famous because the Yves Klein blue is this blue, this ultramarine blue that everybody has a positive relation to. It triggers us because it had red inside. It's a blue color with redness, so it's warm and it triggers us. So there's a lot of positive features with that color area.
Of course. I mean, Facebook Meta changed the color, the hue of the blue, and they have much more clicks. People are starting to use Facebook.
Oh, sure.
More.
Color and branding is super important.
Cool. We discussed today, this is my last question, and I'm going to leave it to you afterwards. We discussed today color in the exterior, and that people in cities, we're not going to go into details. I have architects here who like to use white all the time. So I want to come third row, second one.
But the white architecture in the world today, the architecture in the world is white a lot in the world today.
Everywhere, even New York.
Even in Sweden. I had a course with urban architects in Sweden, north of Sweden, and they were complaining that, oh, everybody wants white in the north of Sweden. And Sweden is a very colorful country. The traditional colors it's a red oxide, red pigment, which is quite chromatic red color on the houses in the countryside. Now everything is white. So it's very trendy. It doesn't have to be bad.
It's not bad. It's just, it has to be contextual.
If it's contextual and if it's an urban area that is planned and everything should be white. But what I want to say with this, if you insist on making everything white, it doesn't cost well-being. Sorry, it does not cost that. You can have parts that are white, but you need contrasts. You need things to happen. The best, and in urban architecture, there's a lot of research. The latest I saw from the University of Ankara, from professor, her name is Saadet, architect. They made a research from Lisbon and some other cities, concluding that where do people want to be? Where do people stay, take photos? Where do people refer to when they're in cities? They want to be in streets where there are many different colors. They don't have to be chromatic. There can be many different kind of beiges or many different kind of browns, but it has to be dynamics. Things have to happen. In urban architect, sorry, I'm talking too much. But in
No,
urban,
it's
there are many
You are here to
psychological
talk.
things about this. In urban architecture, when you live in an area with buildings that have the same architecture, one of the keys is that each building should have a different color scheme. Because psychologically, I want to show this is my house, that's my neighbor's house. There should be a difference. But they should belong. They should belong to a color scheme so they live together, but there should be a difference in the color scheme because psychologically it makes us feel good, okay? When we succeed in doing this, value of properties increase. People want to be in these areas, okay? So keep that in mind. If you like white, use white, but not only, please. Thank you.
Make a contrast. No, he uses green now, so I have to give him credit. Anyone has any questions for Mr. Bertilsson? Yes, you have a question. How am I drawing this at you? يمكن thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you for a very interesting talk, super interesting and informative. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. My question is simple. When you were talking about the color trends cycle, you said that when we go more chromatic, when we are thinking about going more chromatic, we start by using blue and red. Why is that?
Because there's a very good question, actually.
Thank you.
Look, there's a very simple answer to this. We know from research, if you look at children, for example, if you look at babies when they're born, they are already programmed that they can perceive, they can understand certain colors. If there are, and it's always, you know, they understand red, blue, green, and yellow, but red, blue is always the first colors babies understand. It is also red and blue are the colors that it's the easiest decision for us to use. So red and blue coming from that, we are programmed in our genes. Red and blue, it's a very easy decision to use red and blue. So when we have been in a very low chromatic era with neutral colors, and we want to step out, the decision to use red and blue is not a big decision. It's an easy decision. Psychologically, this is the way we function as human beings, right? And the curious thing, what is happening right now, is that usually red or blue is one of the first. Red is a little bit more, calls a lot more attention. Blue does not call as much attention, so it depends a little how we work as human beings. But what we see today is that red and blue together is taking a very important role. And that is one of the reasons that we have identified, we have, like I said, in decades, we have been in a very neutral era, where everything has been gray, white, black, brown a little bit. We want to step out. But it became now, after the pandemic, we have something we call radical happiness. Because after each huge crisis, people go crazy. And we want to welcome many color impressions. So instead of waiting for only red or only blue, we want to do both, right? So things are happening. Shukran.
Ida, we need to teach you some Arabic. Any other question? Yes, Mr. Yasser. Sorry, we're gonna give you. We have a. Sorry.
Hello.
Not
Hi.
philosophical one, simple one.
It's hard to do. First of all, thank you so much for the talk. I'm an architect by education, and partially I have a question and a comment. It's an answer for a question you proposed, which is why do architects usually use white color? And recently I was reading a book called Thinking Architecture by Peter Zumthor, and he was stating a very good thing about this. He said that usually in architecture schools and in architecture offices, we work with models, and our models most of the time are white cardboard. And this is one of the reasons why usually architects perceive their spaces when they're creating it in white. And that's why it usually kept this white. And his thing was to prevent people, to prevent his students of doing white models, because material, color, and space, you cannot separate the three. They must work together. So the space in red different than the space in white. So if you created a white space and then you think about color, it's not the same. So this is one of the reasons why usually architects work with white. But the thing is, or the question for me, based on the color trends, I don't believe that most of the architects believe so much in color trends, and I have partially a question / a theory I want to ask you about. Usually, as you said, that color trends contribute mostly to like the marketing part or the commercial notion of the design. Okay, but usually in the notion of architecture or in designing architecture, we think of experience, we think of space. And as you showed us, lots of your designs is kitchen, because kitchen is a very, it's a very sellable object. We sell kitchen all the time. But when you're designing a space that will stand for so long, we don't think of trends, but we think of colors that will affect the experience of the people using the space. And maybe this is why lots of architects do not care that much, or they're not invested in color trends.
Sure.
This is the thing.
I get Pap, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And trends, but I think there are two different things here. To answer, thank you very much for your observations. There are two different. When it comes to trends, like I said, there are two kind of trends, to simplify things very much. The trends that we change every year, which is a more fast-moving, more maybe for fashion or things for products and everything. For architecture, where we're more conservative, like you say, in an architecture you will live with these colors for many years. These fast-moving trends are not that relevant. I fully agree with you. But there are slow-moving trends, like the ones I mentioned. Because in architecture, if you look at architecture from decades, and you look at architectures 50s, 60s, where colors were more permitted, colors were used, no problem. And then we came to the 90s and everything became white. Okay? White, gray, and black, basically, and still is a lot. But we're stepping out. So this is a slow, because the psychology is still there. The psychology is still there. So from a practical perspective, I fully agree that white can be very practical. But at the end of the day, you're designing spaces where people will be, they will live, they will work, and everything. So color, because color can, when I say color, and that's very important, color does not mean bright red, bright blue, bright green. It means one of these 10, it's a conscious decision how to work with color from a functional, a meaningful, and aesthetic perspective. In public spaces, super important, super important. And you cannot use white only because you take away the function of the spaces. So you have to coordinate both realities. And when it comes to trends, once again, in architecture, I mean, kitchen will live for 20 years maybe, or even longer. If you ask Hecker, they will live for 5 years because they like to sell kitchens fast. But we want kitchens, like IKEA told you, we won't have kitchens that are trendy, that maybe not many people will buy, but some will buy. But most people will still go for the brown or the white, the traditional conservative kitchens and everything. So there are many dimensions of this. My point is always, if we don't work with color in architecture, we don't do the complete job. We have to integrate color as a part of the architecture.
Apple doesn't use color. Brown as a brand doesn't use color. So color trends is not for everyone. But using color, and I was about to say that it's not blue, it's not red, it's not yellow. There are thousands. He asked the question, what's important, hue or the nuance? The nuance, of course.
And I always say, look, the decision of color should be a conscious decision. It should be a decision. It should not be a non-decision. Because I hear too many times that, who cares? Just put a color on there, It should be a conscious decision if you want to create that space or that product or that design that you want to be successful. So white is good. It's not a bad color. It's very functional, yes. But not only.
Lots of people will be happy. Mr. Nikolai.
Yes, so okay. Nikolai Berger, GLC Industrial Design. Thank you very much for the presentation also from me. And I have one comment. We as industrial designers, we usually also present the first presentation for customers in white because you want to avoid all discussions about colors in this presentation as we want to talk about the form. And the real question is, in this fast-changing world we are now, where everything is interconnected and everyone is in touch with everything happening in the world, does it even make sense to announce trends? Because, I mean, as you already mentioned, whatever happens on this world change our minds or change how we feel about our world or our surroundings and change how we feel our colors. And as everything is changing all the time, there is no real trend out there.
But there are two things here. Once again, I refer to the same basically answer as there are trends. I mean, because what is a trend? The trend is understanding a market psychology. Is what color areas are more preferred than other color areas at a certain time in the period, right? But that doesn't mean there are color areas that do not change. There are colors that can always be used for. So I mean, trend is one thing, but it doesn't have to be that you have to change colors all the time.
But I mean, the one thing is the moment you have a trend, the trend is already happening. So you just describe the trend that is happening. But to decide what is happening in the future, we need to understand what is happening on this planet. And this is happening pretty fast at the moment. So
absolutely. No, and it's getting more complex and everything. And the first thing I said to everybody, to understand what will happen tomorrow, you have to understand what's happening today. That's what I tried to explain with the psychological, the cycle of color preferences. If we are bombarded with color impressions today, our minds will move in a certain direction. So what I'm talking about color trend forecasting, we forecast 2 years in advance. Meaning we are working now with the 2025 color trends and on, right? To try to understand what color preferences will people have in 2 years. Starting always to understand what is happening today. Because if we understand what is happening today, we can, but it's no 100% scientific. It's still, things will not be accurate, but we can point out the direction of colors. But it will vary a lot depending on the kind of industry, the kind of product, the kind of target audience you're targeting, the region, etc. That's a part. But if we do it correctly, I mean, we work with the automotive industry. I was in Milano with BASF Pigments, and talking about automotive. They have to make decisions. They make decisions 4 years in advance, yes. And they know if they don't make the right decisions, they will not sell the cars.
That's true. And they will not have an advantage.
It's drastic, but that's the way it is. If they don't do the job correctly, they will not sell. Even though it's the best car in the world, it just won't be sold.
They want to see the color. And you have to understand what's happening today and what's happened yesterday. Because sometimes it's a cycle that repeats itself. And unfortunately, we are doomed of not reading history and learning from history. But if you do read and learn, and you have your signals up, and then you pick up signals, you can set the direction, but you never get. I mean, Pantone Color of the Year for 2020 is starting a new era with a beautiful blue. And then pandemic hit, and they don't know what hit them. So things might change, yes, but there's a direction that you can always tell where the colors are going.
I usually say, when it comes to product design, do you want trendy colors, do you want beautiful colors? Because one thing is to put together a color scheme that you perceive as a good color scheme. It doesn't have to be trendy. It's just a good color scheme from a functional and aesthetic perspective. And the trendy is more, trying to identify what the market actually prefer, what kind of color or color schemes that would, the color combinations they want to see coming, So
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I think we're gonna, Karl is here for the next 15, 20, half an hour until we pick up everything.
Yeah, my flight is leaving at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Sava, you are here. Thank you all for coming. Really, I appreciate it all. Sorry for the slight delay. And then see you in the third and last color talk on the 30th of November. Thank you, Karl, very, very, very much.
Shukran.